Gonna do a little tap here, nothing too serious. That's the quiet tap. How we doing? The work session of the Napa City Council on Thursday, May 2nd, 2024 will be called to order at 3:05. This time, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Attorney.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. The first presentation is ID 4024, Annapolis Ahead Comprehensive Plan 2040. Presenter, Planning and Zoning Department staff.
How we doing?
Between road work and parking garages.
Well, I like your sunglasses.
You gotta wear them so you can't see me cry.
Oh.
Oh.
Right.
Eric Lashinsky, Chief of Comprehensive Planning. Thank you. We don't have a formal presentation for today. We really just wanted to go over the documents that were shared last Friday, and there was a document that was shared yesterday that
I've already memorized them.
you could see on the screen the ward profiles. I feel that we've been able to start to address what we've been hearing at the work session, the prior work sessions. Just for clarity, for anybody who's watching at home, I just wanted to share the documents that were sent out last Friday. Included a memo that summarized, it was essentially the same memo that was shared at the last work session, where we had listed proposed changes that we had heard from the council. And what we did was filled in responses to those changes in red text, essentially the major amendments, in text amendments that we wanted to include. And so there's several pages of those. And then we had two other attachments. We had heard from several council members just the need to simplify the goals and performance measures, the wording, make it less technical, jargony, just more straightforward. And so we went through every goal and performance measure just to kind of scrub them for wordiness and clarity. And so we attached a document that was kind of a track changes version where you could kind of see exact edits. And then we did a chart that just summarized, which goals and performance measures were unchanged, which were revised. We had a few new ones, that was a little bit, I think that chart was a little confusing, but it was kind of intended just to kind of clarify what we changed. So those are the things we've sent out. And then yesterday, the ward profiles document was a recommendation that came out of the last word. It was really just, the intent is to help council members and residents, anybody who's looking at this plan who lives in a particular ward, particular part of the city, understand the big things that could be coming to improve their ward. And, the recommendations that are really aimed at enhancing community amenities and services and the ability to get around. And so that's what those are intended for. And we fully expect, once you read them, you may have some edits to wording here and there or some questions, but we're happy to make changes, of course. So I think those are my introductory remarks. I think that's. Can I just say one more thing about the schedule? So we know that. Thank you for introducing the resolution on Monday for the extension to the deadline. That's the state requirement. We needed to extend beyond the 90-day initial term to adopt, so we're going to get another 60 days. It'll take us till July 11th. So still not a lot of extra time, but we really want to work towards that, and we appreciate your willingness to kind of move on it. So I think we're going to need at least another work session at the end of this month or early June, if possible. And I think at that, what we'd like to do is have an updated document that we can share, updated plan. So, it really kind of absorbs the things that are in the memo that we sent out, and it's something that you can actually see the changes in the plan. So that's really the intent right now.
Great. Alderman Arnett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, first of all, Mr. Lashinsky, but planning staff, I want to recognize how incredibly responsive you have been to our questions and dialogue. Maybe too responsive. It took me till today just to note in the document itself all of the changes in this April 26 memo. And I was going to ask, it is kind of hard to keep track of traffic, so would there be an updated draft with all of the changes? And with that, I would ask a process change, and that's why I'm glad Mr. Waldman is here. I noted in that document that a lot of these things are things that need to go back to the Planning Commission so that they can see the changes and approve, because they are the state land use authority to approve these things. And so in terms of steps in the process, will we wait until the Planning Commission has reviewed and approved all of these modifications, amendments, additions, subtractions, before we put together a new one of these documents? And how much does one of these documents cost? How many bound editions of this can we do? There's another one there.
No trees were harmed in the making of these documents.
We as of now, nothing that's been proposed by the council really changes the broader intent of the plan. I mean, there's a lot of good clarifying edits and more specifics. I think in our estimation, we don't see anything that really goes against the will of the Planning Commission at this point. So,
Operative words are "as of yet."
We've been keeping the chair and the commission in the loop on the changes. They're aware of them, but as of now.
Can't we get some more microphones?
If I may,
To cut them out of the last budget.
I won't have much to say. Two things. If they're not substantive changes, then you don't need to go back to the Planning Commission, I don't think. But the second thing is, if you think that there's substantive changes, not just language, changes, but if you think that there are, then I would suggest that you pass what you want and send it back to us as a package rather than going back and forth and back and forth.
Okay, but in this document, there are a few pages that, like on page 4, note that these are things that will go back to the Planning Commission. And that's fine. I mean, that's the way the state land use, but my question was the process. If the Planning Commission is approving everything here, then it would make sense to create a new one of these where you could see it. I think we're going to run out of colors, but we'll have to have it in some other shade than red, so that it'll be changes that the Planning Commission has reviewed and blessed, or whatever the right word is. But I have to say that it really took me a long time just to annotate this document, and I can't find the smaller document. I'm going to have to get another one.
Oh, the action plan?
but the action plan, but there are several things here that make changes in both the document and the action plan, and I think they are good and significant, but it also makes it unwieldy to try to flip. It's like here, I'm on page 368, and I say add new section per May 2nd, and it's consistency with the city strategic plan. Thank you for hearing that, but it just happens that's where I was. And so there's new text, which means that you have to, I don't know, cut and paste, cut out of this document the new sections. And then this document, which I do have some comments on, but this is changing the measures, the goals and measures. And again, it's kind of hard to flip back and forth. So I recognize the clarifying, dejargonizing, making more succinct. I still have some issues between goals and measures, but those are things, but it is tough to really juggle. I mean, you've been extremely responsive and have done what we've asked, but now we have to respond back to you by recognizing, internalizing, and commenting back. And I'm just trying to figure out how all that's going to happen. It's a big process.
Well, I will say we will use a different color, just on a practical level, to identify the council updates.
Right.
That's something that we can definitely do, so you can see those clearly in the next draft that's shared.
Alderman Arnett, can I take on the first part of your comment? Because you were indicating that it looks like this needs to be sent back to the Planning Commission. We don't feel that way. If there were substantive changes on policy or changing the entire land use plan or something of such substance that you needed to remand the plan back to the Planning Commission, then that would be the course. But it's routine for municipalities, for the legislative bodies of municipalities to adopt comprehensive plans, sometimes with a list of amendments, not even changing the plan like that we're proposing to do here. But these changes are clarifying, they're improving the writing, they're overall enhancing and filling in missing information, but it's not changing the plan itself in any major substantive way. So right now, we're operating on the premise that these changes are going to be made by the mayor and alderman, not by the Planning Commission, not requiring the Planning Commission to renew it, open it up, hold their own public hearings, and send a plan back to you again.
Right.
So that doesn't address your latter part of the question, but I think Eric has said that we intend to produce a new version of the report that will show you in place where each of the changes would be made. So, Mr. Jakubiak, you've come to us having worked with several other municipalities. I guess just as a matter of curiosity, are we more or less engaged as a council than your experience dealing with, and you've dealt with a whole range of sizes of municipalities? I will say, refreshingly, you are more engaged. Truly you are, and more responsive and more thoughtful, by and large, than any municipality I've seen in Maryland. So keep up the good work is what I say. Please let us know what you think, and we'll be responsive to the changes you want us to make.
Okay. I do have some specific things, but I want to be quiet and let other people have a chance.
Pendell Charles?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I sent an email to you all that Mr. Wallman wasn't on the email, was just director and Mr. Lashinsky. But anyway, I said I was going to try to take a look at the other wards, but I did look at my ward first. And I was very pleased. The one thing I am going to suggest, and this is a suggestion, and I ran it past one of my colleagues, but anyway, that first, number one, there's some other things that I would like to add to it. I want to maybe get a little more environmentally sensitive, whether it's tree canopy. I want to talk about things like that that could be added, even a charging station at maybe electric charging station. I mean, some things that we haven't even kind of looked at or even talked about. So I would like to maybe add some, I won't call it fringe, but some things that you had a great global view, but maybe a few more specific things that might be good. I really did like, because I'm going to talk to the developer and the attorney about the West End Plaza where the Walgreens is, and we're going to have some more conversations about that. But I would like to do some of those kind of smaller sub things. The other thing is, because I have put forth on many occasions that one of my real concerns is gentrification. And I'm looking at possibly having a prologue to the comp plan, the final comp plan, to kind of address what may be individual concerns in each of our wards. Mine happens to be, one of the main was is gentrification, but it may be something else in Alderman Savage's ward or Ward 1 that really concerns them. And maybe develop into that a resolution to basically say, this comp plan is a good comp plan, but there's some concerns that we each have in our wards that we want to look at and say, if it runs contrary to that, then we kind of look at it more deeply. I don't like, and I don't want to get locked in to something that we know may end up being a concern without first saying, okay, we're going to lay out the concerns initially, maybe in a prologue and or resolution. And I don't know what mechanism would work the best, maybe both. But I want the residents to kind of see where we're all coming from in our individual wards. And some of it's going to overlap, some of it's going to be the same. And so that's kind of my forward thinking. But based on what you sent me on Ward 3, I really like it. It was a lot of what I've discussed and talked about, but I haven't looked at everybody else's. I may think of something that I see in Alderwoman O'Neill's ward and say, you know, I would like that too. And so that, yeah, it might be something over there. So just to kind of put a bow on the box and to kind of, to say what we have been saying behind closed doors, but saying it out loud, that we don't want to run into a situation where we have a project, but we have to take another lens to look at it, because it may be, and I'm just going to use gentrification because that's the biggest one I have, and say, well, I don't think that might quite work. But we've had a lot of conversations about that, and I know that you all were listening, and I know that you all took that to heart, and I could see that in what you've given me. I just want to make sure that we all kind of have that opportunity to look strategically and surgically at our own wards to see. And like I said, I definitely want to partner when it comes to tree canopy and maybe electric car station or something like that, something that we never even have looked at in Ward 3. It might be something that we want to put at the West End Plaza. I mean, the possibilities are endless. I'm also concerned about the Upper West Street and the traffic. We thank you so much for meeting with Alderman O'Neill and because with the State Highway Administration and all of that. So I just want to commend you all for being able to pivot and move about, but listening to what we are saying on the council. But thank you so much. I was very pleasantly surprised, not surprised, but feeling good.
That's music to my ears. And I know Eric shares that too, because we talk about it all the time.
Definitely appreciate hearing that.
So your thoughts about maybe a prologue or a resolution to kind of, and adding some things, but you don't have to speak to that. I'm just throwing that out here for now.
Well, a resolution is necessary.
Okay.
We certainly need a resolution, without a doubt, and you can make it as long and short as you.
Don't tell me it's long, because. Yes, they will kill me.
I would prefer that.
They will kill me.
That it be done like that rather than rewriting a chapter in the plan that we call prologue, because that just opens up a whole new can of worms. And the Planning Commission never briefed the prologue before. So if you keep it outside of the document itself, but do it as part of your approval process, that's fair. You're the council. You can do what you want.
Okay. I know the resolution is a sense of the council, which is great. The prologue kind of speaks more to the public, to the residents, as I see it. And it says it's a statement from the city itself. The resolution is more from us. That's kind of how, but we can certainly integrate it and see what we can work with. Sure. Okay, thank you.
I would also
I was
just,
going to respond, but I think Mr. Kubiak might have just quashed it. I was thinking the prologue to this could be from the council, and we would give
So
our
true.
response as a forward and note
Attach it
the
to-
thrust.
And attach it to the resolution, I think. So it's, and we'll include the whole thing within the comprehensive plan. So it's there, it's part of the plan, but it's not part of the recommended plan that was sent to you. It's part of your action in adopting the plan.
Perfect suggestion, thank you.
And the reason I think that's important is we are in a different place than the planning staff or the planning commission. We have to convey this to our 5,000 each and anyone else who will listen to us, and our endorsement of it, assuming we get to that point, which I think we are getting there. All the good work we did the last time on coming to an understanding of form-based zoning. So I think we are coalescing. So an endorsement from us, either before this or in the front of this, as a forward from the city council, commenting on the contents that people would see, could be a valuable thing to have.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. You know, just as a kind of editorial comment, just sitting up here for several weeks with my friends, you know, I think as a council, we have done a great job because we've had our finance committee headed by Alderwoman Tierney, they're taking the heavy load with that. And you and I have worked together on communicating with this, and I know Alderman Savage and I are going to work on some environmental things as well. So I think we've all kind of found out, I won't say niche, but we're taking the heavy load for the others. And I think that says something about us as a council and the leadership that we have here. It is really, I find it refreshing because I depend on you all for a lot of things. So just the editorial comment. Thank you. And the staff, of course, is right there with us.
So you and Rob are working on the drive-through amendment?
Yes, we are.
So this was just a check-in or some more presentation to come, or not?
there's no additional presentation. We can go to whatever content comes up, but really just here to listen and.
Thank you. Alderman Savage?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I want to start with one of my kind of bigger issues, not issues in a bad sense, but just topics, I guess. And I will send you some of the documents I put, not that many, some smaller just comments. I'm going to try to, if I have time, get into some of my larger ones. But the first one I just want to start with, which is Mr. Lashinsky and Director Kubrick. I think I emailed both of you about the mixed-use infrastructure. So it's going back to the infrastructure question. And, because in my mind, I'm looking at the ward maps, which I think are great. I told Mr. Lashinsky before the meeting, I'm planning on using that at my town hall meeting next week, just to give people an idea. I think it's a good summary. And, part of my question is going to have to deal with and maybe I'll start there, what the intention is with, because I don't want to necessarily, I already have comments on this, but I don't want to get into too many details because I'm guessing that's kind of what you will do at some point with the small area plan, right? So I guess if you could summarize for us, what's your goal, in your view, what's the value and goal for these ward sheets versus what you think can be accomplished later on with a small area plan?
Take an initial stab at it. Eric, back me up. These ward sheets are meant to convey to the reader of the plan what they're most likely to see in their neighborhood if the plan gets implemented. So it's a guide sheet and allows people to focus on the ward. The small area planning is far more detailed, and we would look to these sheets as the policies to be implemented or the plans to be tested in the small area planning. Not to suggest that small area plan is limited to what's on this, that everything's open when you do a small area plan. You're looking at land use and detailing and what mixed use means in this context and the character and the design and infrastructure, bikes, circulation. So the small area planning is far more detailed than this purports to be. This is just a representation of the main highlights of the plan, the main projects really that are unique to that particular district or ward.
Yeah.
Eric?
That's pretty much it. I think, we would want, for example, if we're doing a small area plan for an area that covers your ward, and we would focus on some of these locations that we see some change happening in the future. We don't know what that's going to be. We would want to have a very community engaged process to talk to residents and other business owners and really try to get a sense. We would really do that community process as part of the small area plan. Whereas right now we're really just trying to summarize what's in the plan already. So it's an opportunity to really kind of bring more people into the discussion.
And where it ties back with the infrastructure for me is that, and I understand the comp plan is high level citywide analysis. And so, but I guess where's the level when is it appropriate to bring up some of the infrastructure needs? So for example, on the ward sheet, and I know all this comes from elsewhere in the comp plan, but it identifies, for example, the Caliente Grill lot, that shop, which is currently in the county, but it's a growth opportunity if we could actually come to an arrangement for annexing it, right? Or take the Hillsmere, which is in the city, the Hillsmere Shopping Center as an example, but either of those really. So my point with that is we have certain areas which we know we want to see more mixed use, and I can't remember if either or both of those are on, I think one of them are at least are on that mixed use list where we would like to see it. I think the Giant is too, but so what I'm thinking is where I'm going with this is like with our infrastructure needs and we had all these presentations about the capital improvement project, the budget, is some of those developments, and again, I kind of go with like the Dutch philosophy of build it and then they'll come. So for this, I'm thinking, well, how do we get that mixed use redevelopment to happen? And I'm thinking, there are some things, obviously on Forest Drive, we need to make changes to make it more friendly and to make the mixed use just plain work, right? I think you both said it needs to be connected in order to have it be to the community, right? To have it function well. So on those parcels in particular, we need certain improvements to that Forest Drive. We may need the bike lane improvement or just, again, reconfiguring the roadway. Because the traffic's really the big limiter with infrastructure, adequate facilities, right? So, like, how can we, and I know when I emailed you about the mixed use, you said, look at the, what was it, some of the guiding principles for
we have
use.
Performance standards for mixed use, yeah.
But is the comp plan a place where we could or should be calling for some of those specific to say, okay, this area we would like to get more mixed use. This is area we need these specific infrastructure improvements. So let's be targeting funds in whatever next year's, the year after's budget as far as making those improvements, right? Is this, because that in my mind, once we make those improvements, then we can really go to and maybe that'll help encourage the owners to make the improvements on their own, right? And that's the whole build it and they will come. If we improve that infrastructure, hopefully they will fill that in. So I'm just wondering like how that, if you get my question, how that fits in with the comp plan and without getting into too many details and future planning with infrastructure.
Yeah. So that is a really good question because it's all about what are we focusing on at the time we're doing a comprehensive plan. Inevitably, once we open up the comp plan, we see the need for further, more detailed work. But when we have an innovative new comprehensive plan, it's generally best to stay focused on those big principles and get them adopted so then we can then begin implementing them. So the way the plan is now, we have the policy basis for zoning improvements, form-based approaches, infrastructure and crosswalks, and from the staff standpoint, particularly our development and design review division, to say no to a project that doesn't match up with the walking and pedestrian-friendly elements of the plan. So if you look at the Forest Drive and look at the Eastport or the Annapolis Seafood site, because that's sort of think about this in context. There's a site that's been abandoned from a commercial standpoint. It's under consideration for redevelopment. Already, the owner of that parcel has seen the comprehensive plan and said, we see this as part of a larger mixed use. We see that you're calling this area as part of a larger mixed use area. So would you? So your thinking is X, Y, and Z, and it is that it's residential in combination with commercial that's walkable, which is a big difference than what the initial proposal was to the city, which is a gasoline station with a convenience store. That proposal comports with strictly with the zoning standards as they exist now. And we haven't applied a test to see the impact, but generally it's a permitted use with special exception approval within that zone, and it could be approved. But we've already signaled what the plan says, and they're aligning their expectations with the plan. So already they're coming to the table eventually with a plan that shows a mixed-use project. Then we would review it to implement those guidelines. We can't say now what is best, whether it's a 20-foot crosswalk or a 9-foot crosswalk with pedestrian signalization there, or that it's better to require the developer to build a new sidewalk and bike path on Tyler to provide pedestrian access to this mixed-use center, or we don't know that until we see a plan and we have a sense of what that site can actually accommodate. So we have to resist the temptation of being specific on a comprehensive plan and get the policies right and get the big principles right. That's where we are. So that, and then the next step is for us to say, okay, this site is not moving. There's no development happening here. We're having trouble implementing our mixed use ideas. What can we do as a city to bring that about? And that's something that you could say at any given meeting. We'd like to direct the department to consider this, et cetera, or direct us to come up with the zoning standards to incentivize redevelopment, or look at the CIP and say what projects would help jumpstart that redevelopment or revitalization of an area. But all those are more detailed considerations that require kind of a case-by-case analysis, and that's just not something that the comp plan allows us to do. So I would say let's get this big policy change adopted, and once we get it adopted, we're free then to begin implementing those ideas.
Yeah, a great answer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There's a really good precedent, I think, to what you're talking about for presumably Bay Ridge Road or Forest Drive or Bay Ridge. I mean, when you think about the success that Inner West Street has had, and just basically the city leading on that, and I'm sure the mayor, has some experience there.
About that.
But I mean, perhaps there was a recommendation in the comp plan closest to when that process happened. But it was, just basically aimed at a certain kind of character that we want our streets to have, and then there was closer study about what do we need to do to really catalyze the kind of economic development that we want to see. And I think, decades later, what we would want to do on Forest Drive or Bayers Road would be different than Interwest is a totally different context, but similar ideas, if we're similar goals, you know. I think the comp plan is very clear about wanting to prioritize roadways where they're extremely dangerous today. You know, we have the data on where the fatalities or crashes occur in greater concentrations. And so that gives us really the game plan for where we want to approach improvements, I think, so.
Alderman Pendle Charles and Alderman Annette.
It brings up to me a much, much, much deeper question, and I think I've mentioned it before, but maybe not in this context, Alderman Savage, about build it and they will come. It's a much, much deeper question, I think, if we look at democracy and what does that really mean. And I'm going to kind of leave it at that. I think when we look at a democratic society, I don't think the context, in my mind, I could be wrong, is build it and they will come. But that's just a much, 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 much deeper dive. But I'm going to leave it at that, and we can have another conversation about that.
Alderman Annette.
So I want to jump in on that. I was going to do this down the road, but there are some big concepts here like equity and those sorts of things, which I think are big policy issues and are things that really need to be talked about here at the City Council, as well as at the Planning Commission and the other boards and commissions. And I think that gets to this democracy. I remember having a dialogue, and I'm sorry that neither of our two housing people, Brooks or Dewan, are here, but
I'm here.
oh, Dewan, Dewan, okay. Dewan was telling me he couldn't wait until I moved to Florida so he could move into my house. And I said, make me an offer, you can move in right now. But I think that gets to the after effects that I want to talk about. But I wanted to start with the policy issues, which, Eric, you directed us to page 32 and 33 of the comp plan and said those are essentially the policy issues of the comp plan. And I can accept that, but they're not the number one priorities of our constituents. The housing in the community survey didn't really come up at all. Now, I know people can argue, well, people who are living here are more or less most satisfied with the housing, so it's not going to be a big issue for them. But this whole issue that still vexes me about separating affordable housing from workforce housing. And I'll note on the definition section, page 11, there is no definition of workforce housing, which I think is different than the HUD definition of affordable housing. And I think that the goals that are in this plan strike me as much more aimed at what I consider to be workforce housing. Affordable housing to me are people who don't have a home or people whose home is so substandard it's really not habitable. I think HUD says that 60% of AGI or less, those people are affordable. Workforce, I think, is a higher income level. I've heard 60 to 100% AGI. I've heard 80 in our legislation, 80 to 120. I also think that distinguishes between crisis and desirable. To me, if you don't have housing, you don't have food, you don't have clothes, you're in crisis. If you have to drive extra distance to get to your job, that's not desirable, but it's not crisis. But I have been, and in fact, I was somewhat uncourteous with Dana Jones and very demanding of Sarah Elfreth, trying to find the genesis for the governor's 96,000, I believe, workforce housing need in the state of Maryland. And I'm still pursuing that. I was working with MML just today to try to, and no one yet can tell me where that number came from. It may come from Mr. Day at the state level, I don't know. But the interesting thing about that number is I took the 96,000, divided it by the population of the state, came up with a percentage, and applied that to the population of the city, and came up with 361, if you look at the data on page 66, the desired outcome, 361 affordable housing units, which when you use the average family size, translates into about 1,500 or so new individuals. So it really does seem like the goal that we have, the goals that we've set up and the ranges we've set up here on page 66, whatever the genesis of that 96,000 number, pretty much on target. I mean, it's good enough for me. So then, getting back to the affordable housing and taking what Teresa Wellman has told us, she said that in the HUD region, I don't know how that's defined, Annapolis represents 2% of the housing, but 8% of the affordable housing. I think we've done our job. I think we also have, even with its deficiencies, the MPD unit requirement. So I don't think the city has to feel ashamed. That doesn't mean the work is done. But I think we have carried the load in terms of meeting those goals, both legislatively. My point all along, aside from the fact that I question whether we have subsidies or incentives that are really going to make workforce housing come, I don't think it's going to come from form-based zoning alone. I'm worried about the 15-minute city and what I call the after effects of density growth. And Rob just touched on one of them, transit. I'm seeing transit. In fact, Brooks, you were on the front page of the Capitol as MTA is reducing the amount of transit, no longer doing the K Street bus, which is what I would have been taking when I was working down in DC. And so things like transit, but things like daycare, things like getting to healthcare, things like getting to amusement, the things that I think we also need to be planning for and are discussed here. But when I look at our measures of success, our goals, and then our measures of success, I think we're kind of shrugging our shoulders, saying, yeah, we're really going to need that. But I think we really need to have in here some things that are much more specific, not that we need to approve transit. And I'll just take transit as it's being discussed in the budget. I was astounded by the Transportation Department's presentation on the city budget. They were talking about having fixed routes and on-demand routes, and they were talking about other enhancements, and they did not talk about the fact that in fiscal '26, we fall off a cliff. We come up $2.5 million short on transit budget. Well, if we're doing this increased density and we're trying to get people out of cars and we're trying to make this so that people can live in this place and do everything else in this place without jumping into fossil fuel burning things, we've got to really have, I think, much more substantive plans. Now, this is till 2040. Can't do everything overnight. We won't do the increase in density overnight. But I don't think we're going to be doing the addressing of the after effects overnight. So that's one of the areas that I really want to dig into is the numerical underpinning, because we start right off on these changes and goals, and the assertion is that we want growth. And maybe the assertion would be better, we need growth, but then we need to accommodate that growth. And so I've been looking very much at the improvements in the goals and measures. They are improvements, but I don't think many of them are measures yet. I think a lot of them are more aspirational. And I think you can go through that where we'll say by 2040, we'll increase the amount of affordable housing by 6.5%. That number has no context to me. I want to know how many units does that equate to? How many household members does that equate to? And again, I will apologize. I have not memorized this document, and maybe it's in there like that old ad prego. It's in there. But I'm not feeling it yet. And that's where I'm still back at the starting gate in terms of some of the principles that have to do with the comp plan. I need to have a number and a composition of these target populations. Rhonda and I were talking because we have similar family beginning. Her husband and my wife and I were struggling to get into housing back when we were first married, and we did it. We got in there, and we got into our growing into wealth. I'm convinced Brooks and Dewan have shamed me into looking more at the underpinnings of workforce housing. I'm convinced things are different now. I think people are showing up with student loan debt. I think Dodd-Frank has made it tougher to get jumbo loans. So I think there are bigger barriers to entry to get into affordable housing. Chris, you were talking about being at Oxford Landing and talking about how happy the people in that community were to be living in Annapolis. I mean, it was a big deal to them, I got from your impression. So there's no doubt about the desirability of the plan that we have here and the actions, but I still need to know how many Rhondas and Rosses are there that are going to get in, get their pay increases, and get over that threshold hump versus people now who just can't get there. And how many of those people are in the hospitality industry, for example? I've asked both Gavin and Dick Franyo, what does their staff look like? Well, a lot of it are young people that are just sort of passing through. This is a good job while they're doing something else. But a lot of them, this is their profession, and they have to come from far distances to get to the boatyard in the morning to do their work. So anyway, I'm going to write this up because I know I'm blasting you with a whole bunch of things here, but I do think that ties together and is part of the basic, very basic underpinning of what I think is largely, and Dewan said it, a housing document that has all of the other ornamentation on that Christmas tree, like transportation and stormwater management and so forth. And so to me, that's where I have really been focusing on the urban growth sections, the housing sections, those sorts of things. And I'm still working on it. Anyway, shut up, Ross.
Do any of the council members have comments on that? Because I'm going to offer just a quick way of conceptualizing this.
It's just a quick one, and then I'm going to go to Alderman Tierney had a hand first up, and then Alderman Chandelmeyer. So, yeah.
The plan generally is based on its growth projections are based on Baltimore Metropolitan Council. It's an objective body that does projections for the entire region and all the jurisdictions, and it projects essentially flat growth for Annapolis, very slow, gradual growth through 2040, and it computes to about 1,500 new households for the entire city. Well over half of those households are already baked in. They're housing units that are in development projects that are being built now or going through the permitting process. So the remaining roughly 700 would be new households. And the plan says those new households should be favored. The preference is that they be workforce housing. And that the workforce housing not come about through just new residential developments everywhere because we're constrained, but through mixed-use developments in a number of locations throughout the city. It doesn't make recommendations for creating new affordable housing developments that is defined by HUD, the 60% AMI type of housing. It says that that small share of additional growth that's not already baked in, if we're going to develop that way, we ought to target those units for moderately priced housing or workforce housing. And that's, so projects like the Willows would be an example of that. But also market rate housing that is developed at a lower cost within a mixed use center without the tax credits and the public subsidy or the preference. So this is not a growth plan. This is really not a pro-growth plan. This is pretty much a flatline plan, but to the extent that we do grow residentially, we ought to grow in a way that provides employment opportunities for the people that work in the community. That's essentially, in a nutshell, what the plan calls for on the residential side.
Attorney?
Thank you, and I apologize for not being here at the last session. Bob, it's really great to see you, and thank you for being here. So I am one of the fortunate ones, I think, in my ward addressing, what are we calling these profiles, right? What are they called?
Ward profiles,
yeah. Because it's clear, you have a commitment to each ward, and I really appreciate that. And it's clear in the Ward 1 profile that you have, you've considered the history and the distinct features of that and downtown and all that, so that I'm at a good place where I'm at a springboard where the ward is in a good place where I can then, without anxiety, look at some of these new initiatives, such as connectivity and others that you speak of in the comp plan. And also, I'm also at an advantage because I do have sort of this form-based zoning community scale to work with. But in, being so close to the budget, I really get that we have to optimize our assets. Some of them are underutilized, and even in Ward 1, there are areas where we could do better. And I appreciate that. So the other thing I learned in budgeting and reviewing the budget is the comp plan this year, specifically, I don't know what happened, but it's not to be underestimated that the capital projects really reflect, I believe, the comp plan. I mean, that's kind of, that's where it all comes from. And when to get to Rob's question, I think, in kind of looking at this from a helicopter view, this all comes down to what do we want the comp plan to be? And there's some great language in the code that really says that it is a springboard, if you will. If you don't mind, I think this is really important that this is in our own budget, and it says the city's comprehensive plan is the foundation for the development of physical plans for sub-areas of the jurisdiction. So, it stops at a certain point. It's the foundation for the study of subdivision regulations, zoning standards, and maps. It doesn't change zoning, it doesn't change regulations. It's the foundation of areas in need of utility development or extensions. So there's a lot that happens to get to that point. And I saw that in the capital improvement budget, that we focus on areas. Budget is always a consideration, specifically with utilities. And we say, from this, you've identified areas, so we don't have to start from scratch and say, okay, what can we do? How much can we afford? And where is it going to go? So then the best sentence here, I thought, was to give us more less anxiety about this, you know, is the city's comprehensive plan is the foundation for the evaluation of short-range plans, which are zoning requests, subdivision review, site plan analysis, and day-to-day decisions regarding long-range jurisdictional benefit and the alignment of local jurisdictional plans with regional plans. So I don't believe, I think we need data to come up, and there's a, I didn't read all of your appendices, but there's a ton of data that went into this. So that's done, but I don't believe the plan is going to say, okay, what am I going to do at Spa Road? This is what it's going to look like. You know, it just goes so far to say, this is an area that we could, you know, do better, for lack of a better word. If you're waiting, I don't know if I have a question in here, but the other, I'm so sorry about that. So I think the question is, well, first, I'm really pleased with the capital improvement project plan. I mean, it speaks of the administration, and so therefore, I think the comp plan has to leave some flexibility. We will change administrations, you know, we will kind of detour into things like, look how we had to detour during the pandemic and stuff like that. So we can't really go too far with it. So do you agree that it is a fluid document? How's that question? And there was a compliment in there somewhere for addressing Ward 1. Oh, wait, I will backpedal a little bit. I know my residents are going to say, what about the historic district? So I saw in, you know, in this that you have it in the comp plan, but I saw in this profile, it's like, oh, where's the historic district in this? But it's understood for me, but I was trying to figure out a way to say that. But anyway, so just talk to me about where this ends and how we springboard off of it.
Yeah, you've just given a great Planning 101 course summary. You're spot on. I can't add anything to it. And it is very much a document that's meant to be flexible,
Okay.
not stringent or overly strict. It's meant to create the opportunity to continue working towards long-term goals. And obviously, it could be a different plan. Annapolis could have adopted a different strategy with different goals, different ideas, different projections for growth and development, different ideas about conservation and preservation, but it didn't. So you do have a clear sense of marching in a direction, but the specifics are not meant to be detailed in a comprehensive plan, so that you have flexibility to respond to conditions. Remember, this is a 20-year plan.
Yeah.
So we want to keep marching forward. We keep an eye, Eric and I, on the long term, the public interest, which is defined by the people that live here today and the people that don't yet live here, the people that are not yet born. The community as a whole is sort of what we're asked to think about as we draft these plans. And so you're spot on.
Well, I think the other thing that I learned from being so involved in the budget is we have to, you're sitting down, we have to develop so that we improve our assets. We cannot just keep our existing infrastructure, or we will leak, fail, and to do that, we need to expand it and you know the revenue cycle, right? I mean, I think that's what I really learned from this capital improvement budget is we have certain assets, whether they're roadways, they're not sexy, you know, they're utilities, that they'll die if we don't give them an opportunity to expand and grow and increase their value. I mean, I just read that we added a booster pump, you know, necessary for Parkside Preserve. You know, we wouldn't have done that otherwise, but so I see, you know, infill development, smart development is necessary. And I think it's really important that the public is aware of that, again, especially with our limited, for lack of a better word, opportunity for revenue as far as property tax because of the limited limited area of real estate and some of the area that's non-taxable. We don't want the property owner to keep carrying the burden of maintaining utilities and da-da-da-da, right?
Yeah, it's exactly right. So not only does the redevelopment or infill.
Redevelopment, yeah.
Not only does it refresh the real estate and the market value and the assessed value to the city, it refreshes the infrastructure because it requires the new infrastructure to be installed. Every infill development project improves the environment because we're using new stormwater management techniques. So gradually the city becomes a better, cleaner operating place. Our proposals actually create more landscaping, more trees. And so that's how we get to a better future, is small increments at a time.
Yeah. It's like cleaning out your arteries, I guess, to live longer. That is a really bad example. I apologize.
I like it. We were just talking in our staff meeting today about the SPCA property and how, for decades we have been missing that gap in sidewalk on Bay Ridge Avenue, among other improvements to that property, but it's like an excellent example, I think, of, property that's being brought up, to a current standard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Savage. Oh, Shannon Meyer, sorry.
Thank you. Cool, he's here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I really appreciate the comprehensive plan, the deep diving in, going into the housing portions. It gives us some pretty detailed and alarming statistics for how many of our residents are facing cost burden status in the city. It's around 1 in 3. Approximately 50% of renters, approximately 1/4 of homeowners. It's something very personal to me. I've been in that status myself. I've got through it by living in off the books apartments. A good friend of mine, single mom now, but she had to stay in an abusive relationship for 2 extra years to save up to find a safe place to live where her daughter could still go to the same school. So these things matter even for residents who are here now. Having actual detailed ways to accommodate these families that are here now and struggling because of our housing crisis. I also, to piggyback off of things that Alderman Tierney said, we have kind of the first initial bits of the rough draft from our land use study on the infrastructure funding per acre. But some interesting facts on us is we have about 260 lane miles and 106 miles of sidewalk in the city. And in order to maintain that current level of acceptable service, that would cost about $12 million annually to keep maintaining. That's not even getting into our water issues or sewer issues. And basically what is very good about this plan, by focusing on these smarter infill developments, is that we get a revenue source to pay for that maintenance and improve those infrastructure systems without laying down new infrastructure that creates future liabilities for us. So I'm looking forward to getting the rest of that data in a more manageable, readable format soon, but it's coming, and we already have the revenue data, and what we're seeing is these denser mixed-use areas are a bigger asset to our budget. Like Park Place is the #1 revenue generator, not just in the city of Annapolis, but in all of Anne Arundel County, followed shortly by mixed-use pre-zoning downtown. And the more we do that, the more we'll have the ability to keep up with our infrastructure needs. The more we'll have the ability to focus subsidies on folks who really need an extra hand up. And we'll also be helping a lot of those folks who are falling through the cracks now, who maybe don't qualify for those subsidies, but also are just really having difficulty getting by just day to day because things are hard right now. And with that, I yield my time. Thank you.
I want to thank Alderman Tierney for that. Thank you. Park Place resident, thank you.
#1 generator in all of Anne Arundel County. It's massive.
Tax base.
Value per acre. Yeah, it's their assessed value. Yeah.
Party back at Ellie's place. Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to get in one specific item on the table that you sent out. which is very helpful to see. Thanks for putting that together. And it pertains to annexations.
You're in the summary chart?
Yeah, summary chart, and this would be page, let's see, I think page 1. Yeah, page 1, PM 2.2. So I do appreciate that it was simplified down, but I want to just make the point that what it says now is each annexation approved by the city will have a net positive fiscal impact to the city. I'm not arguing against that. I do think it needs to be a factor, but I just want to point out, and even the code itself has more than just fiscal impact to it. Just to be frank, we have the one potential annexation we're working on in right outside Ward 7, Cars Road, and that's one of the challenges I'm facing is from staff essentially saying, well, there's going to be a fiscal impact to this. And I said, well, that's important to know, but I think we as a body are going to need to have to talk about it because in this particular case, there's an environmental benefit. The property, and not to mention social, I think there are reasons why these particular streets were not annexed. They're kind of left this little square surrounded by the city that's currently in the county. I think we should correct those historical misdeeds, but or oversights, I should maybe say. But environmentally, they have failing septics, and so there's an interest, I think, in the city's sense as far as our water quality, and it's right, obviously near Cars Beach, to do what we can to help clean it up, and then as far as putting in our sewer line and whatnot, so they can connect to it on their own. But my point is, I think that it'd be good if this could incorporate more than just the fiscal, and mention some of the other factors that might be reasons why we want to do annexations. And I think this would also fit in with some of the housing goals of the plan, because if annexed, we would be able to potentially get some more housing on that property, right? So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there because I know I need to bring that up with the rest of the council sometime soon here.
Thank you. Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To follow up on that, and again, me wanting to dive into the data, if you look at Appendix C, which is the fiscal impact of the plan, the governor used the number 96,000 for people needing workforce housing. In Appendix C, the estimate is that there are 60,000 workforce people who serve the city of Annapolis. I'm presuming we had a transportation study in 2016 that said that only 8% of the people who live in the city work in the city. So I'm presuming that most of this estimated 60,000 workforce don't live in the city. I think it's also fair to assume that a lot of those are not in the adjusted gross income levels that are talked about workforce housing, because a lot of them are lawyers and lobbyists and high-level health professionals and so forth, and some of them are actually down in the affordable housing level, backhoe operators, et cetera, although maybe they now earn more than college professors. I don't know. But in any event, it is trying to square this plethora of numbers. There's another set of numbers that I think Brooks referred to just a few minutes ago, coming out of the reports that Teresa Wellman sends to HUD, and there's tables in the comp plan that show people in the different AGI categories. And those numbers are much bigger than what we're talking about if you take the implied number from the governor. Now, the reason I bring this up, and the reason that I'm so concerned about getting the numbers right and the targets right, and more importantly, understanding the composition of the people who are in these categories, is I'm pre-baby boomer, but I remember the big build that we did to build elementary schools for the baby boomers. And then came the baby bust, and we were frantically trying to figure out what to do with all of those empty elementary schools. So we can plan for the optimal target number of workforce housing people and overshoot the mark. I would also relate to you an experience that Sheila Finlayson and I had when we first got on the council, and we wanted to do workforce housing for public safety people. And we did the legislation, and we went to the police and we said, please support our legislation. Why aren't you coming out supporting it? And they said, because we don't want to live in the city with the people that we're arresting and ticketing. And we went to fire, and fire said, we don't want to live in the city. We want to live close to our second job, which is someplace else. And both groups said, we don't want to live in the city because it's too expensive and the schools aren't good. And so, again, having a target number, we don't have any information on if we build it, will they really come? Because they may not want to live in the city. They may not want to come here. And I think it's important to at least get some notional analysis of those kinds of things when we set our targets, when we change our zoning codes, when we collapse our zoning categories. We need to understand, because those do have impacts, and those do have impacts on people who live here now. And my sense is the people that we're doing these things for are largely people who don't live here now. And so we need to figure out how we're balancing. We need to be careful that we're not overshooting the mark. And that's why maybe some would say mindlessly, trying to lift up the hood and look underneath at the numbers, and also the composition of the people that we're trying to do good for, because I don't think we know the answer to those things yet. And maybe we never will, but it does seem to me we need to do a little bit more work. I think the work that Brooks has gotten done on the revenue per acre, and I think the cost per acre is going to be very enlightening stuff, but that's a more macro level kind of thing, and it doesn't really help us zero in on the people who live in Oxford Landing, those kinds of people, and what we're achieving in our social goals with the comprehensive plan, which really is a social goals document. So again, I think Appendix C is worrisome to me. It's worrisome because of the heroic assumption that's made that there's 1.5 workers for every resident. I didn't see any sensitivity analysis. What if it was only one? What if it's really two? And does that mean if it's one or the others, those two outliers, that the plan isn't fiscally feasible? I didn't see any discussion at all in that appendix, but and I do think the appendix are important additions to the documents, particularly the three done by BEA or BAE. They are the data sources that underpin. So anyway, I'll just bring that up because I think it does speak to the point that Alderman Savage was just making.
Well, one thing I just want to add kind of to your point, Alderman. I know it's there is language in the comp plan about, trying to create housing options for people who don't live here, who work here, who commute longer distances. I mean, that's certainly one rationale. And the other side of it that's in here is just the fact that we're not creating a healthy balance of housing types today in the city. And there's maps in the housing chapter that kind of show the kind of housing that's getting created today. And it's predominantly large single-family homes. We have duplexes that are getting consolidated. We're losing some of that missing middle housing. And so some of it is about creating a healthier balance of housing so that people in one situation have a place to move to if their income changes and they can move up, or people have to move down. Basically there's some opportunity for lateral movement. And today, anecdotally, what we hear is just there's nowhere to go. People end up having to move outside of the city if their income changes. And so that's part of it too. It's not just about, attracting people, but, having places for people to move.
I'm so glad you said that, because that is, to me, a judgment call, not a balance. I would submit to you, if you look at the 400-year-plus history of the city of Annapolis, that has been the distribution from the get-go. There have been the people that are chartered by England and who are the merchant class, and then at the other end, there's a spectrum. And I think there's largely always been a missing middle. Now, should that be? I don't know. And I think that gets to this question that I think we continue to dodge, this whole equity issue and parity issue, and that whole trade-off between equality and freedom. And I think that is a very fundamental policy question that really does need to be discussed. And that's one of the things, as I went through the changes to the measures, that's asserted, but I'm not sure that's a majority-held opinion on the council. I am sure it's not something that the council has discussed and vetted. I listened to most of the planning commission meetings, and I didn't really hear much vetting there either. It was accepted. Missing middle was accepted. There's not a balance. I'd like to know what planning theory says about that kind of balance, and is that balance a one-size-fits-all? Every city has to have that distributional scale with a whole bunch of the middle, whereas we're very much a bifurcated income scale and very much a bifurcated housing scale. And I believe always have been, and yet I think have largely been a successful city. Now, I recognize the people that Brooks talks about, and that is, I think, part of our social, as politicians, our social obligation to worry about that. But I don't really see the underpinnings that support that judgment for the city of Annapolis. Maybe universally for the state or for the nation or for the world, but I think that's something that it can be debated, at least, and should be debated. So I don't accept it as being asserted as correct and a goal that we have to go after, yet I can be convinced. I'm trying to keep an open mind. I am listening to all the podcasts that talk about the need for workforce housing, and I'm understanding that life is different for this generation than it was for Rhonda and I. I'm understanding that lifestyle choices are different for the new generation than they were. I mean, I look at Brooklyn. Most people, 80-90% of people who live in Brooklyn have always rented, and their families have always rented, and they're happy with that, and it works for them. I just am not sure that we've brought that down to the Annapolis level. And that is a judgment, and I think it's a policy judgment that really needs to be debated.
Right. Well, I want to thank the council for all the input here and all you guys, because I really think we're working towards a document here that we can all be really proud of and can set the city, in a great direction for the next 20 years. So thank you for all your hard work. Chris?
Just to wrap this up, has the council given us the okay to incorporate these changes into the draft? Gave you a week or so to review it in advance, but we would like to
Sorry, Mike, Chris, just got your microphone on so I can record.
Thank you. Has the council, is it the will of the council that we make these changes that we've provided in Eric's memo so we can keep moving forward?
That has been the process, yes, please. Alderman Savage?
Yeah, just first, for me, I think I didn't have any comments on the memo.
Right.
That looked great to me. I had some, again, just smaller kind of comments on the proposed edits to the goals and performance measures,
Right.
and I can send those to
Please, yes.
with those.
And we'll work on that fiscal annexation question, see if we can come up with wording for the council to consider.
Thank you, Alderman Pindell-Charles.
Thank you,
and
Mr. Mayor.
Alderman Attorney.
I'm going to have to read them over again because I've read so many iterations of things. I can't remember what's the last thing. But the other thing I want to ask, the last binder that you sent us where a lot of things were added, I think Mr. Lashinsky has it with him today. Is that still etched in stone? Is that still, and then you're adding that? I'm just trying to figure out, because I know you added some more pages based on the 411 initially, and some other things were added. So what's the kind of final binder with this going in that? Am I right or not, or?
Pink?
Right, we're building, this is the most recent plan from.
And that's the 411 plus?
Yeah, this is, and that is all the pink text.
Right, the pink, okay.
So
pink.
we're going to be amending that draft with these changes in a new color. That's basically.
Which will only add about 48 new pages to the report. So.
We'll have to, we'll edit some of this text to create some more space, stuff that, might seem superfluous but.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
all right, thank you.
Alderman Attorney.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Remember I said today when I hear something 3 times, I have to ask the question, but could you take a minute about how policy is addressed in the comp plan? The comp plan is not a dictation, not a directive on policy. Where, if you had to do a flow chart, where is policy? Who is it established by, and how does it weave into the comp plan? I think that has to be clearly stated.
Does it need to be clearly stated now through my answer or
No,
within
just
the
now,
plan itself?
Just now, because Alderman Arnett brought it up about policy, and the council has opinions about policy. And so how is that weighed into the comp plan?
In this case, pretty explicitly, we've actually listed the policies under various headings, and then each of those policies is supported by a variety of smaller goals and objectives and action steps.
So are we approving those policies
Yes.
by approval of the comp plan, or are those policies reflective of the city council policies?
You would be approving those policies if you adopt the plan.
Okay.
They are the recommended policies given to you by the Planning Commission.
And who thought of those policies? Or are they
They-
from the strategic plan or from present
They
needs?
emanated from the public planning process that predated this
Okay.
event this evening, and for 3 years of work
Professional and, yeah.
with engagement of staff, certainly, but with the Planning Commission and all the various neighborhood and community
Yeah.
meetings that Eric ran over the course of 3 years.
And one thing I forgot to mention that I was fortunate in Ward 1, and I don't know if you did it for other wards, is that you really looked at the past legislation that was affecting the ward. Like in my case, the legislation on the sprinkling the buildings and reactivating the second floors. You took that further and said, okay, we can get housing in those units. I really appreciate that. So I don't know. Does that help everybody? The how policy is weighed in the comp plan, or where it comes from, or I know it's always an issue. Alderman Arnett, I know you have.
So I have written up a set of questions about some of the framing goals and the items that are on pages 21, 22. I haven't formalized them yet. When I was trying to get some people to counsel me on not exposing too much bad breath before I went public with them. But I do think that is our fundamental role. I think our value added is the policy. I agree with what the planning director and staff, Mr. Lashinsky, are saying. The comp plan is overall guidance. The actual implementation comes when we go to change zoning code, when we collapse the number of zoning designations, so forth, and in the budget, when we actually go to do whatever it is we're to do with form-based zoning. And I did have a specific question on page 5 of the document about the implementation of form-based zoning, because I've heard different things. Will incorporate form base as a overlay for the 12 development areas, was one thought I heard, versus amending out Euclidean zoning and replacing it with form-based zoning. And yet I heard in a couple of different presentations from you, Eric, that it isn't an either or, that there are aspects of Euclidean that define uses that can go into the forms. And so that's still somewhat ambiguous in my mind, but I think that's really something that comes after the comp plan when we do the implementation. So I'm not sure it's important to get to here. But I do think that our value added, to the extent we have any, is to evaluate the policy objectives and make sure that we have some kind of an agreement on that. I mean, I raised my issue about the distribution of the missing middle kind of requirement, and I can be convinced, but I'm not yet. So I think that's work yet to come.
Yeah, I only brought it up because I sometimes see it as a point of contention, you know, but Alderman Savage is exactly right. The budget is our voice. There's a lot of power in that budget. Thank you.
Alderman Vidal Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Going back to form-based zoning.
Oh, I knew it.
Euclidean.
I'm sorry.
Thanks, Ross.
I'm not gonna dwell on.
I should have stopped.
I don't want that to necessarily come later. I want to see something, either a definition for form-based zoning, or as Alderman Arlette said, an overlay on our ward profiles. I want something a little more concrete in what I'm dealing with, because I'm still
Can we say,
little bit
can we use the
trepidation.
term that was mentioned earlier?
Say that again.
Can we use the term that was mentioned earlier?
And what was that?
It's in there.
Prego.
Believe me, it's in there. It's all over.
I'm
We have
from
the
Missouri.
definitions.
Show me.
Okay, I'll show you.
We don't
I'll
have
send
to
you an
write.
email. We'll show you.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
We hope we've addressed this. Pretty soon the plan is going to be all about form-based.
You know, and that memo that we sent out on Friday, there were some very specific
Page 5.
changes, to address some of the concerns we heard about form-based zoning, clarifying, you know, it's based on small area planning. It's not going to be done citywide. It's going to be very incremental, you know.
Thank you.
Is the date on this 4/25, not 4/26?
Well, it was sent out 4/26, so that might be a mistake.
No, it's April 6, 20.
Oh, it should be 4/26.
I was, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You know, I started it.
Without objection, Mr. Mayor and council members, we'd like to go ahead and incorporate this. You'll see the final draft, of course, of the plan, but we don't hear any substantive changes to what has been produced before. And again, these were all meant to address your concerns at prior work sessions. So we're going to put this to rest now, and remain open to address any comments that you might send us over the next couple of days. But we feel like we're moving pretty quickly in the right direction, and Councilman Arnett, please, let's continue our discussion so we can deal with, kind of conceptualize this broader policy discussion that you have in
I
mind.
move that they move forward.
I think if any votes need to take place, but yes,
I think
thank
it's
you.
I think it's very good, and there may be some more refining type questions, but please do incorporate it, because it's going to be so much easier to look at a document where all of these sections are added, so you can get the continuity. A lot of it is just adding new sections that there's a little bit of changing of some existing language, but not much. I think most of it's enhancement. So that would be my sense.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you again. Thank you, Mr. Wallman.
Appreciate your hard work. Thank you very much.
We have a work
Thank
session
you.
next Tuesday
Thank you all.
on no harm.
All right, City Council, anything else for good order?
Oh, God, no.
All right, remember, if anyone's around for the cleanup on Roe Boulevard, don't park in the lot of the archives, but we're doing a cleanup from 11 o'clock till 1 for one of our new up-and-coming parks, Gateway Park. And there'll be a little cookout afterwards, just 2 hours. We're going to cut in on one small trail on the state side and potentially mark out one on the Navy side. So I'll see you all there, I hope, or some of you there at least. Thank you. Cool. All right, meeting adjourned.